Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the West Orange Board of Education meeting for April 16, 2018. Right here at West Orange High School. Mr. Calavano, roll call, please.
Mr. Alper? Here. Mr. Charles?
Here.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Present.
Mr. Robertson?
Present.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum? Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Notice of meeting. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided for in the following manner. That a written notice was sent from the Office of the Secretary of the Board at 4 p.m. on January 9, 2018. That said notice was sent by regular mail to the West Orange Township Clerk and the editors of the West Orange Chronicle and the Star Ledger. That said notice was posted in the lobby of the Administration Building of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Calavano. I need a motion for consideration of the closed minute meetings for March 26th, April 4th, April 9th, and the public meetings from April 26th, April 2nd, 4th, and 9th. Need a motion.
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Calavano, vote.
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes, but abstain from March 26th as I was not present.
Mr. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes, but abstain from the hearings because I was not present.
President Charles?
Yes. Mr. Rutsky, Superintendent report.
Thank you. We have two proposals tonight. We have a very nice donation in the amount of $250,000 from a former Pleasantdale parent, and I'll let Dr. Polera talk a little bit about that when she comes up to do the proposal. But it's a proposal for our Library Media Center at Kelly and the restructuring of it, what it'll look like. So that proposal tonight will provide you with the information you need to know. And then we're going to do the summer school proposal as well after we're done with that. So as we normally do, I think we do the Media Center proposal, allow for the board to ask questions, and we allow the public to ask questions, and then we can obviously let the individuals go home and then do the same thing for the summer school proposal. So if I can just ask the board to come out in the audience for the presentation. Ladies, if you mind coming up, please, and start the presentation.
Good evening. In 2016, our school was renamed for our alumni twin astronauts, Mark and Scott Kelly. At that time, one of the guests at our renaming ceremony was a former Pleasantdale student who's a friend of Mark Kelly and Gabby Giffords. And he was very, very impressed with that event and kept in contact with me since then. And he wishes to donate $250,000 to his former school in honor of a former teacher that he had who was a former colleague of mine, a retired teacher, who he felt was instrumental in helping him to become a reader, which is why he wants to invest the money in a library media center. And our redesign dream is to transform this library media center into one that contains a makerspace and also a space for literacy. This would allow our diverse population to become part of a global movement in which our students can become creators and not just consumers. Our vision is to create a space in which every teacher and every student at Kelly Elementary School can use the space to explore, create, problem solve, and tinker while integrating literacy and STEAM initiatives. The theme of our new center is based on our namesakes, the Kelly brothers, and their exploration of the next frontier, of course, which is space. As scientists and problem solvers search to find ways to stay alive on Mars, if we get there or when we get there, our students will be conducting their own design solutions to global issues or those in our own community. We're committed to fostering critical thinking, mastering academic challenges for lifelong learning, developing social, emotional, and cultural understanding to be able to participate constructively as citizens in a global society. So, when we were offered this money, I contacted Nancy, who has experience with this kind of design, and she put me in touch with a design company, Soika Smith Design Solutions. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy so she can tell you a little bit about our process there.
Hi, good evening. Basically what you're sitting in right now, this high school library, this was designed by the Soika Design Studio, and they do a tremendous job, and they're very, very wonderful to work with. Bridget, who is the owner of the company, couldn't be with us tonight. She's not in the state. However, she sent Ingrid, her project manager, and she's going to go through the package that they put together for the space.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bridget's project manager. I've been with her for about 3 years, and we were really excited to be asked to come and work with Nancy on designing a space that would integrate the Kelly brothers' legacy and to integrate all the new things that are happening in libraries these days. So I'm going to kind of scroll through our packet. I think each of you has one. You can keep referring to the floor plan. As I go through the slides, you'll see the different areas in the plan. So you can if you keep that floor plan handy, you can see the different areas. Our initiative was to create a spaceship or a NASA type environment that always excites kids and makes us think about what is beyond our own environment. So we started with the ground control, which is your circulation desk and the place where the teachers are able to have their space and their storage. You can see that there are 2 task chairs for the different media specialists to work in. That space opens up behind it to have a collaborative space to work on both a whiteboard, a tack board, and a bench area so that you have the ability to think about problems, work them out on, instead of paper, they can talk about their ideas and write them on the board. As you go further back into the space, in the back corner you have the Endeavour Makerspace and the Time Machine Workshop. Those are 2 makerspaces that will each accommodate the different age groups that you have at that school. So your smaller kids are in the outer area. Those are butcher block tables with stools, and you have carts behind there. The carts will house different things like Legos, kinetic types building blocks. You have all kinds of materials that you can build with. You have things as easy as a tongue depressor, Legos, so that you have easy access to things that you can pull out in a tray, put on the table, and work with it. In the bigger space, the Endeavour Makerspace, that's for your higher grades, and in there you have 3 large storage units where you can put away all the different things and take out the different tools that you need for that day. You have a counter space for people to sit and 2 work tables that they can work around standing or with their stools. This way you can also move them. They'll have wheels on them so that you can also use them for presentations. So the spaces are made to be flexible so that the teacher or the students can work either in 2 groups or in 1 big group. This is a media center, so we have books. In that center section, I'm going to, hold on. I'm going to stay on the floor plan. In the center section, you have mobile bookcases. These mobile bookcases will allow us to store your books, but also move them aside. If the Makerspace is having an event of some kind, we can roll those bookcases close to one of the walls and open up the space for people to come and see the collaborative work that the kids are doing. So it gives them the media space the flexibility. Like in this room, you have this large center space. In this school, you have a more limited space, so we thought by making the bookcases mobile, we can move them out of the way for different types of events. Where you see that discovery capsule, that is a small closet that houses all of the technology that the library uses it. So you'll see in a couple of slides how we use that space to put a artful rocket ship on the front and a whiteboard space on that side. The whiteboard space can be used in the classroom area, that technology capsule area. That is 6 tables that can be pulled apart or put together, depending on how the classroom is being used. It sits about 24 kids and faces a smartboard on the lower wall, and then has more computer space that I believe is a permanent computer area for the 5 positions at the north part of the room. The perimeter has bookcases that are 60 inches tall. They will be new bookcases, as some of the bookcases do need to be refurbed. And then above them, we've done an art wall, which you'll see in the slides in a few minutes. I'm going to now show you the details of the space. So that's your capsule. You can see it in 3D. You can see how the desk has an approach area, a transaction counter for the kids to work and give the person behind the desk a little privacy. The tack board on the back allows them to put announcements and different things on it. And the smaller table on the side is where you'll put your OPAC so the kids can come up and look up their books. This is the proposed artwork that will go above the bookcases on the long wall, where the technology area is, where the technology capsule. Right. These are the bookcases. We did mobile bookcases, and we designed a different front for each bookcase. Again, NASA-based discovery. And then the one that's solid is a marker board. You can see them in 3D. This is the closet. So we thought we could paint it orange, in the NASA orange. And then we've rethought this space shuttle to possibly use the logo that the school has, which is a rocket with the 2 faces of the Kelly brothers in it. So we've been tinkering with that idea. And then the whiteboard on the right-hand side faces the classroom area. These are some design components. They are some lounge pieces that can be taken apart and used individually or put together as a long sofa area. And then you have a display unit so that the librarian has a place to put things that are more geared towards whatever that month is, or whatever they're teaching, or the holiday, or whatever new books are coming. So this is kind of a grab and go, something that they see right as they enter the space. These are some of the chairs that we're proposing you put around the different areas. The hokey stools are a stool that allows movement. They have a little bit of a rounded bottom so that you can fidget and kind of move with the energy that most kids have. The premise is that your brain thinks when you're moving. So trying to keep kids that have lots of energy in a stool that will let them kind of use up that energy and let their brains think and come up with great ideas. The chair has an interesting green story. It is a Navy stool, but it's made up of 110 Coke bottles. The Coca-Cola partnered with this company, and they recycle the Coca-Cola 2-liter plastic bottles, and they create furniture with it. So, and then the tables are collaborative dog bone tables, are the 2 tables on each side, and allows kids to either work around it or individually. And you have a cyber counter and some stools. The steam room and the butcher block tables show you a little bit of how this room would look in the Time Makerspace and the Endeavour Makerspace. This is just a little bit more of a visual of some of the counters in the back corner. We put storage underneath, and we're going to put the 3D printers on top of it. We have found that when you put a 3D printer on a small table, the 3D printers tend to shake quite a bit, and they will take a table and make the legs get wobbly. So we've learned that we should really put them on something a little sturdier, and then it allows you to put all of the things that these printers need to run underneath. Those are the counters in the back space and the table and the stools that you'd see in the closed off area for the older kids. And then finally, on the left-hand corner, kind of down by the back entrance of the room, you have a Lego wall. This wall will be put up onto the wall. It is permanent, and the kids are able to use Legos in those bins to create all kinds of things and put up their names and show off their Lego skills. This is the back of the circulation desk, and it gives you a little bit more book space, a bench, and a writing board. And that's it. Yeah.
Set up a microphone for the public to ask questions. Thank you. Mr.
Okay.
Charles, I just want to thank Ingrid and Nancy and Joanne. They've done so much work and so many revisions and meetings and doing different things, and this is just a tremendous opportunity. Renaming of the school was very special, but to have the opportunity to get a $250,000 donation and to be able to make this state-of-the-art and have all the students going through Kelly to be part of this, and the teachers to have this wonderful environment to teach in is just really fantastic. So I want to thank the three of you for doing this. And Joanne, I know that this is something that is very important to you and makes you very proud. So we're happy we can be part of this. Absolutely. Mr. Charles.
Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I have two questions for Dr. Joe. Does the donor want to remain anonymous, or can we?
At this point, I think he does, but I'm going to ask him if I can't just say
Okay.
who it is, and because I'm sure he's going to want to come to the dedication, then
Sure.
everybody's going to know
Sure, yeah.
at that point anyhow.
And do you have any other favorite teachers that you like to honor? But more seriously though, for Bridget, how long is the project from okay to finish?
About 12 weeks.
12 weeks, okay, so that's good. Okay. So I guess, Mr. Alper, do you have any questions or
Sure.
comments?
This is fantastic. It's gorgeous. I think the kids are going to love it. And, the price is really great. So my main question is really related to that, which is what are the contingencies for cost overruns if things end up costing more than has been proposed? What happens then?
The group was given a number, and then we had an overrun number, and so they brought some of the things that were originally in the plan. They took some of those things out. So right now, we have a 10% runover. And again, when you're doing these kinds of things, you want to plan for it. If we find that we do not need any of that money for the overrun or the runovers, we will then put a couple of those things in that we took out back into project. And that would happen after everything is done, and hopefully before the dedication.
And the plan is that if this were approved, all the work would be getting done over the summer?
That's correct. Yeah, the purpose of it being now is because they need to order all the things, and that really is what takes the longest. The construction is not going to take long. It's getting the materials in.
Okay.
Ms. Mordecai?
Thank you all so much for all your hard work. This is really, really good. I just have a couple of questions. And you answered it kind of with the hoagie stool. Given the population at Kelly School, I was wondering if there's anything geared towards sensory and anything else for special ed students, whether furniture or balls or touch wall or something like that.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons that we chose the hokey stools because a lot of our sensory kids really need to, a lot of our teachers need to, we all kind of need to move around. Also, the Lego wall is very productive for our sensory kids. A lot of the things in the Makerspace will be geared for them also. And they're doing well now with the coder pillars and things like that. So the things that we buy for the Makerspace are for K-5, the children that have autism and the children that have other special education needs. So we're taking into consideration all of that. This same donor actually had made a donation for at the time of the renaming. So that money I'm very carefully spending, and I'm being mindful of the all of the kinds of strengths and challenges that our students have.
Okay, thank you. I recall my years at Pleasantdale School, then it was called, with Mrs. Garrettson and her three-legged stool, and so the hoagie stool reminded me of that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Schwartzbaum?
First, I want to thank the donor. It's really a beautiful design, and many of the things in the design are age appropriate. It's very flexible, which I think is really phenomenal, that the ability to do many things within the room. It's green, it's sustainable, which is really phenomenal. One of the questions I know we had was about doing mobile charging stations. Is that something that you were able to incorporate into the design?
Not at this point. We'll see what happens with the costs and what kind of money we have at the end of the day, and see, how expensive they might be.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully, you won't have cost overruns, and we can do the mobile charging.
When we do our design, when we do your demo, we'll look at where your existing electrical is, because I think we want to work within the parameters of your existing electrical, so you don't get into the cost of an architect and the construction that happens with trenching a floor, because you are using an existing space.
Right.
So that's why we wanted to be mindful. But we can move things in the room so that we are more, where the electrical is more accessible, and definitely add. Most of the furniture does now have the ability to put a pigtail on it and USB and power.
So just for the benefit of everyone in the audience, can you just elaborate a little on some of what a mobile charging station is? What was part of the design?
One of the ones that we use the most is called the Powerball, and basically it's not the lottery that we all wish we could win, but it's they come in different heights. All it is a standalone unit that has a pillar, and on the top there's a ball. And in that ball there are 3 or 4 different modules. You can put in regular outlets so you can charge, and you can use 2 or 3 USB units. And those modules now also have the ability to pop out. So as your technology starts to change, you can also just change that module's pods without having to replace it. Then what we're seeing a lot too is in the lounge pieces. The lounge pieces all have the ability to add power to some part of the chair. And so if I have an outlet that's close enough to the wall, and my outlet or my chair has a 6-foot cord, I can plug it into the wall, but when you're charging at it, you're plugging right into the arm of the chair or the side of the chair. And those are definitely things that we can look at once we're really looking at the power and the details of the work. This is more design, and we concentrated on using the money on furniture that would be flexible for your space.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No.
Mr. Robertson?
Nothing further, really. I just want to thank Dr. Joe and Nancy and Ingrid and Bridget for all the hard work in this. It's really visionary. Mr. Schwartzbaum really asked the question that was my original concern, and that is because with all the 21st century classrooms, you want easy and safe access to outlets, whether they be mobile charging or stationary, that fold back into the furniture. So that's key, so that you can utilize, iPads, computers, and all that fun stuff, as well as charging for robotics. But love this. Look forward to seeing it come to fruition.
Good, thank you. We'll take public comment and questions. If anyone from the public has a comment or a question about the library, please come up to the microphone. Mr. Calavano will work with the clock. Please state your name.
Alan Grossman, 4 North Cohen Place. I just had a question where exactly in the building it's going to be, what space is going to be repurposed. I know the building is fairly tight in space, so where is it going to be exactly?
It's in the existing library. The existing library has 2 office spaces in it now. One office space is going to remain the same, and the other space is going to become a makerspace, and the students, a small group instruction that's in there now is going to be moved to a different place.
So there's no major structural changes to the library? No structural?
Okay. Anyone further? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda.
Ladies, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, if we can switch gears, Mr. Mendez and Mr. Moore, if I can ask the board to come back out into the audience, we're going to do the summer school proposal.
Good evening. Today we're presenting increasing opportunities for credit recovery and Parcc Assessment requirements. In alignment with our strategic plan, we have several goals that really focus on performance of students across our content areas. These are some of them. Our Algebra 1 and Geometry goals consist of increasing the number of students who successfully complete their course and meet the desired level of proficiency on the standard math assessment. That would be the standard state assessment. In ELA 9 and ELA 10, we're looking at increasing the percentage of students who pass or exceed the Parcc benchmarks, and for the graduation rate, increasing our graduation rate over the next few years from 86 to 91%.
Let's just take a look at the high school requirements so we understand them. Mathematics is 15 credits, which includes the Algebra 1 and the Geometry. The third year of math builds on the concepts and skills of algebra and geometry and prepares students for college and 21st century careers. We take a look at English language arts. That's 20 credits, 4 years, aligned from the state from 9th through 12th, the standards. The New Jersey Department of Education requires you to either pass through the Parcc, which would be Algebra 1 and Geometry 10, or you have 3 pathways. The first pathway is take and pass the Parcc test, Algebra 1 and Geometry. ELA 9 and 10 you have to sit for, but ELA 10 has to be passed. The second pathway is take and pass an alternative assessment, which would be SAT, PSAT, Accuplacer, or ASVAB, which is the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery. And the third pathway would be a portfolio assessment, which is a class in which students have to demonstrate proficiency in both ELA and math before receiving graduation credits.
So when considering these high school requirements, we looked back at last year's data, 2016 and 17, to see the performance of our students in their courses, these being those with the greatest potential for credit recovery. You'll see the number of students that are enrolled in Algebra 1, Geometry, ELA 9 and 10. You'll see those who have the opportunity for credit recovery and those who still need to pass the Parcc or an alternative in order to meet the state assessment and/or graduation requirements. So for these students that you saw on the previous slide, these students here who, again, in the credit recovery column or in the Parcc alternative, this is what they did last year. Those students either participated in a neighboring summer school and received credit. So that first column shows what the students in 16-17 did to recover their credit. Or they're currently repeating the course in our high school this year, or other. Other could be that they transferred, other could be that they're not taking that course this year, they may be taking it next year, which is an option. We wonder about the number of students who actually do attend summer school to receive credit. There is a course tuition that is required when students do go outside, and that's an approximate $340. So we're wondering about that cost to our families. Also, if a student repeats the course the following year, as some of them are this year, it does impact their course sequence. It impacts opportunities for advanced level work, elective coursework, and in some cases it removes them out of their graduation cohort.
That's correct. So we looked a little bit about, we tried to project for this year. Right now, because the third marking period just ended, we took the first two marking periods. So let's take algebra. As you can see, we have 519 enrolled. In the first two marking periods, when we looked, we had about 18 students that weren't passing and could benefit. We don't have the third marking period yet. So the third marking is a better indicator for us, but we wanted some projections as we wanted to get prepared to possibly offer a summer school. But if you take a look, we can approximately accommodate, just from our projections alone, at least from 49 to maybe 96 students. If, you know, again, this is a projection. It doesn't mean that some students won't make it out because they do have some time, but we are trying to project so we can see if this is feasible for us to do. So we looked at the first two marking periods to give us an idea, and we looked at marking period 2 only. We have the benefit of looking at marking period 3 now because it just ended Friday.
So with this in mind, we are proposing a consideration for a summer school credit recovery program for 2018, which could take two potential tracks. One could be pure credit recovery. The student comes in, takes the course, makes up the hours, and another track could be to meet the Parcc Assessment and graduation requirement. And we'll talk about how those two combine. First, credit recovery. We're specifically speaking about the 4 courses, Algebra 1, Geometry, ELA 9, and ELA 10. The New Jersey statute reads that credit recovery courses require a student to be enrolled for a minimum of 60 hours for a 5-credit course. So that would govern the amount of time the students would spend in those courses.
So we're proposing a schedule that would have an AM and a PM session. We're also looking to do 66 hours just to account for any emergency absence a student may have. But the times are listed as 8 a.m. to 11. If you take a look, we're in our AM and PM, we offer Algebra 1 in both sessions, Geometry in both sessions. This is, again, tentative and preliminary. We're proposing that we offer ELA in the morning 10 in the morning session, ELA 9 in the afternoon session. This is just in case a student happens to be in a situation where they didn't pass one of the maths and one of the Englishes at the same time. This will afford them a chance to take both.
When we think about the Parcc Assessment requirement, for graduation, Algebra 1 and English 10 are the requirements for graduation. Most of the new requirements apply to the class of 2021, which is our current 9th grade student population, which would mean generally Algebra 1 and English 9, because those are where our ninth graders are. So the code reads that participation in the 2018 Parcc administration is mandatory for all students who are enrolled in a district-approved credit-bearing Algebra 1 or Geometry summer course anytime from the end of the regular school year through the end of August. So by providing the summer school experience, we would also be mandated to administer the Parcc to those students in these content areas. When we looked at the FAQ for students in this area, these are the, I think, two most common questions that are asked. The first, are students in the class of 2021, our current freshmen, and beyond able to retake Algebra 1, retake the Algebra 1 Parcc Assessment? The answer is yes, but only if they're enrolled in a full year course, which is during the year, a refresher course, which the summer program would be considered the refresher, or a different type of instructional learning module that the district would create. So can the students retake Parcc Algebra 1? If they fail the course, yes, but only if they are enrolled in this refresher course. Second, if a student in the class of 2021 who did not pass the assessment but passed the course, are they able to retake the assessment without taking the Algebra 1 course again? The answer is no. They must be re-enrolled. So therefore, instead of the student having to take, let's say, the course for another year, or take a different alternative way in order to graduate, we could potentially offer the refresher over the summer. The student can sit for their assessment, and they can meet the assessment and or graduation requirement.
So the Parcc Assessment would take place August 2nd, 3rd, and August 6th. We would have 2 makeup days, which would be August 7th and 8th. And the last day, we would get everything together and be able to wrap it up for the state, and also credits that, grades that we would have to make sure that our school counseling department has, or any other school counseling department for any student that we are servicing.
Projected cost plus a potential for revenue. These, based on the 2016-17 considerations and based on our marking period 1 and marking period 2 performance, we would consider offering 2 sections of Algebra 1, 2 sections of Geometry, 1 section of English 9, 1 section of English 10. These are the staffing needs, the teachers, counselors, coordinators, their hours, for an approximate cost of $29,850. For our West Orange students, we are recommending no cost. They would be able to enroll in credit recovery, and they would be able to, we would be able to, as an LEA, consider that a refresher course, and they could retake the Parcc. For neighboring schools, we could potentially charge a tuition of $340 per course for the same service. Right now, the Northern Region Services Education Commission charges that price. They're servicing Clifton, Kearney, Lakeland, North Arlington, and Wayne. Belleville and Bloomfield no longer have a summer program. They're sending most of their kids over to Clifton, and Clifton has the Northern Region Services.
Okay. So we're thinking of a timeline. Today would be one of the days on our timeline. So today we would present to the board, hopefully by, we're saying anywhere from April 13th and the 20th, when, I said marking period 3 is closed, so we would take a look at that, get to our school counselors, perhaps start finding some students that will be eligible, get letters out to parents. We're looking to do this. Please do not think any of it is hard and fast, because it does say tentative, but we like a timeline because then it puts it in motion. So then our school councils begin to meet with our students somewhere in the end of April, maybe the beginning of May. Hopefully we can have a parent meeting and talk to potential parents with students, potential students, and talk a little bit about the benefit of attending our summer school. And we start our registration, hopefully. We're thinking hopefully in May there'll be an online registration, and if it's late, June 27th for an in-person registration. Again, this is tentative. And of course, we'll give a reminder letter on June 4th. But our timeline can be cleaned up. We can do that more realistic once we know what the feelings are in terms of actually having a summer school here at West Orange.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Mr. Charles, if I could just add one thing. There was a little bit of information we received this afternoon. Livingston is starting a summer program as well, charging $350 per student. South Orange Maplewood started it 1 year ago, and they are charging for their students in their district to attend, and they are not permitting anybody else outside of the district to attend. Their charge is $300 for the summer school.
Okay. I just have, before I get to my colleagues, just real quick. If the governor follows through on his promise to do away with Parcc, how does that throw a monkey wrench into all of the configurations?
Well, again, we still have to have a state assessment that's in code. So whether it looks like Parcc or it's different, the news that we're hearing is it's still going to be electronic. What's going to be different is how it's measured and things of that nature. But there's a lot of conversation, but going into changing something takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of groups out there working on things. We're basing this on what we know as of right now. The purpose of summer school is to help our students who are struggling at that point and provide them the opportunity to, as we described, credit recovery, and so they do not fall behind. And any student who has to take a 9th grade class and they're a sophomore, 10th grade class and they're a junior, that's an awkward situation. And so to provide a service to our students and our parents is something we feel is very important.
Okay, fair. Okay, comments from the board. We'll start with Mr. Schwartzbaum this time.
I was going to ask about the Parcc update. We're in essence asking students to give them the elective to come to summer school. So what happens if students choose not to go? What are we going to do?
Well, again, I won't speak for Mr. Moore, but I know Mr. Moore and the rest of the administrative group here. They're going to do everything in their power to reach out and make sure that the kids are here. The communication with the parents, meetings with the parents, that kind of thing about the importance of this, and really talking about long-term. If we're talking about freshman and sophomore, we always talk about it's a marathon, not a sprint, and we need to make sure that parents understand the importance of those students having the chance to pass that course or get what they need in that course in the summer. So to answer your question, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure the kids are here.
So is there a minimum number of students that we are going to have to have in order to run the program?
Well, step one, I'm looking at the projected numbers. We were looking at that today to see how many, what is it that we can feasibly do. There's a few things that we're thinking about in terms of a number. I don't want to say a number to you because I didn't really discuss that with Mr. Rutsky and with Ebony, but I think that if you are interested and you propose that, what we would do is the third marking period, which ends today, which ended today, we're going to go back, take a look at our potential group, and I think that would give us more of a real baseline to say, look, we've got this many kids with a possibility of being in our summer school, and that would give Mr. Rutsky a better idea of the hiring, how many people, sections we need, I think would be probably a better answer to give you right now. Once I get those numbers together, I will definitely pass it on, but that's not a long process because we have already started this work. We will be able to give you a better idea.
One last question. If we open this up to other districts, will there be any criteria that we will have in order to accept students other than their willingness to pay?
The high school team is developing a handbook. They're also reaching out to the other districts that are currently implementing a summer program to take a look at what their criteria is. So I think we'll get some guidance from our neighboring towns, get some guidance from the districts who've really been doing summer school and successfully for some time, and then use that criteria to gauge our admittance process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Alpert on this side.
Sure. On page 5 of the presentation, with the number of kids who are enrolled and in credit recovery and need to pass Parcc, just want to make sure I understand. So for the first example with Algebra 1, there were 360 who took the class, 43 failed it, and now are in credit recovery and need to do something to get their credits. And another 191 are of the 360, they took it and passed the class but didn't pass Parcc. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
It gives me a sense of the numbers.
Or opted out.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I think Irv covered a lot of what I wanted to ask about Parcc. Given the perception that Parcc is dying, maybe not as fast as a lot of us would like it to, but still dying, first, do we have any sense when the next assessment comes down? Because I know there is the legislative requirement for your graduation test. Any sense of if you already met your graduation requirement by taking Parcc, if you still would have to take the new thing or not? Because if you wouldn't rather, then there is still a reason for kids to say, oh, they should take it so they can get that graduation requirement out of the way now, but not maybe as much if they have to do something later.
There's some discussion, and I'll know more next Friday, a week from this Friday. But again, as you can imagine, this is very complex, and trying to change, and when you put graduation requirements behind it, what happens to those kids that are right in the middle of it? So there's a lot to this. That's why it's taking some time.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I'm just thinking ahead to whether or not, if we're marketing that one of the main purposes of this is for Parcc, to get your Parcc done, that if there's a sense that, well, I don't have to worry about it because there's going to be something else next year, that maybe we might want to think of something else that we can market in that place to try to attract, to get those people from especially outside West Orange and get some revenue.
So I'd like to just point out the two different purposes. So one primary purpose is the credit recovery. That's our primary.
Definitely.
Students who can benefit from recovering credit in a summer have greater opportunities during the year to stay within their graduation cohort, to seek out electives and or continue along their proper sequence. So that's our primary. Because the state says if we offer summer school, you must sit by the Parcc, then we had to put that side by side, right? Or the alternative. It doesn't have to be the Parcc, it can be the alternative. But that would be a secondary reason. So instead of a student having to repeat a course for an entire year, instead of a student having to go through a portfolio assessment process, which the state requirement is an additional course that they have to sit in, again, it would eat up their course time, right? Sit in that course and demonstrate proficiency in ELA and math. Here's an opportunity within the 22-day, 66-hour commitment of the student. Let's demonstrate proficiency over these 22 days. Let's get you to have an additional opportunity to meet the assessment requirement for the state, and then they can continue on with their sequenced plan for graduation.
Okay. Are there thoughts on offering additional classes, maybe not this summer, but maybe depending on how this goes down the road, maybe some advanced math and things that aren't just for fixing your problems if you didn't pass classes, but to actually get ahead?
Absolutely. We will consider all of those things. We were very cautious and waited until after the budget to do this presentation because we needed the budget and we needed to see those marking period projections to come in. So if there is budget for it and if there is demand, it would be based on registration. So if students are showing that there is a need, then we would be able to offer those courses along with the budget. Right now, these courses are showing the greatest need, right? And they're not as high as one would think, right?
If we offer externally and it looks like there's enough interest, would we consider adding additional sections or? Great. And I think just my last question, do we have any sense if anyone just south of us in Union County is doing summer school? Because geographically, if Livingston is just to our west at 350 and then no one else is open until Clifton, there could be a pretty big group of kids who might be, you know, we're 325 maybe. If we lower it a little bit, you could maybe take some of that. That's all I got.
Yeah, Ken, just, I'm sorry. Ken, you have Kearney, you have a few places that still do it, but Bloomfield, as I was talking to the Bloomfield principal today, West Orange is attractive to them because of the proximity.
Exactly.
So, you know, Belleville too, I talked to Russ Pagano, who's the principal there. Again, West Orange becomes attractive. There's Kearney there, though, that's right there that we would have to compete with.
True.
And stuff like that. But there are schools right in our area, right, that still do it. I did put the list on the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see some of those.
Thank you.
And the reverse to your question, if we don't need 2 sections, if we see that the students meet their requirements, we can offer 1 section. As long as we have students to populate the 1 section, it would be an opportunity.
Mr. Alper, anything further?
That's it for me.
Ms. Mordecai?
Sure. So, thank you for this research. I'm glad to see this coming to fruition because I've been asking about this for a few years now. First of all, our slide 6 is slightly different.
We were waiting for the data so that we could show you very specific. We figured you might ask some of these questions.
Okay, great. I'd like to get that. Couple things. If it's a potential senior taking the class in the summer, do they graduate pending passing Parcc? And what does that look like for the senior?
Okay. So pending passing Parcc
In the
or
summer.
the credit recovery?
Their credit recovery.
Okay,
and
so credit recovery would work just like anyone else's. Yeah, they can graduate once they pass the credit recovery class. And it has to be those classes we offer, right? Good.
So are they walking in June with everybody else, pending August, August 8th?
Okay, I know what you're asking.
Yeah.
You're asking like graduating junior type of thing. Like even though we know they're going to graduate, but they have to take a class in summer school, can they walk? Yeah, there are students that do that. That's for sure. But I'm going to leave that to one where that's a case by case, and that we pay close attention to that, and it's weighed in with the school counselor and the parent and so forth. But you're right. We try not to do that to kids because we know graduation is more than just for the student, it's for the family. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that goes into that. So yeah, of course we would be able to accommodate if the student so fits. But I would like to just say that has to be looked at case by case, but of course.
I mean, if the student's really close, that if it's maybe really one course.
Yeah, definitely.
Instead of 3.
Yeah, we've done that. We do that without kids that go to other summer schools, so there's no reason why we wouldn't extend
I just want to make sure that's being looked at. Also, given that we bus 5,000 students, are you looking at another location as well, in addition to the high school? Maybe Washington School or somewhere else for one of the classes? Or are you building in busing into this program? Because I didn't see anything about transportation.
No, we didn't. We just thought of, we thought that cost. We thought that transportation would be on the student. Because we had put in potentially, I'd like you to consider this, we had put in potentially that it wouldn't be a cost to our students. I do think getting up here might be something they can do because they've had all year to, and not to be, conflictual or to be, to be provocative, but they've had all year to do it, and this is a recovery time. It kind of lays on them to be accountable of getting up here, investing, and kind of putting into work, especially if the tuition is so minimal or,
Okay, I know we had the summer step-up program, and that wasn't that successful because it was tough to get kids to come. And that's why I asked about
No,
the
no, I
busing.
get why you're asking.
Yeah.
But we think that the motivating factor, though, is graduation for a lot of our kids, and we would market it that way. And believe it or not, many of our kids that, once they hit that junior year, they get their rides because some of them drive. There's a lot that goes on into it. I think for the first year of doing this, I would like to see, I do think kids can make it up here. I'd like to see if they can make it up here. That's why I didn't put it in to transportation at this time. But I mean, if that becomes a factor, we can look at that again. We can always come back to the table. But
And my last question is, I noticed your start is July 2nd. Given the July 4th holiday, there's a lot of families who are going to be away and probably returning July 4th at night or July 5th. And so for the first 3 days, they might miss summer school if the family's away on vacation.
Okay, so we can consider the dates of the program and extending it. The issue would be then extending it further into August. And we cannot do that because the park window closes August 10th. So we are within the park window. If we have the date off July 4th, and the students cannot be absent more than once or they will not meet the 60 hours. So it will be a commitment for the student. We even looked at starting it a week earlier as a possibility, but again, then we run into park window issues.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson.
First of all, I applaud the effort, and Mr. Moore, I know you've had this idea baking for some time, and I think in order to boost graduation rates, it's worthwhile. I wonder though, given resistance to Parcc hasn't died down in the past few years, and given that some of the kids who opt out of Parcc still do take PSAT, SAT, etc., could you give me what other requirements to graduate based upon some of these other tests, PSAT, SAT, AccuPlacer, ASVAB for the military, etc.?
So for the current 9th grade, if a student is retaking Algebra 1 or English 9 because they need credit recovery in 9th grade, then the Parcc is mandatory. For all other students, they can opt to take an alternative assessment. And the alternative assessment, as Mr. Moore mentioned, it could be the SAT, the PSAT, the ACT, the AccuPlacer, or the ASVAB.
Right.
For the 9th grade students, however, it is a requirement.
Understood.
It is the district's responsibility. If we offer a course anytime between the end of the school year and August, that we require the students to take or sit for the assessment if it is a requirement for that grade level. So because we're offering the summer program, then we're also required or bound to that statute for the 9th graders.
Understood. It doesn't have to be tonight, but it would be good to have that table of what is necessary for the other requirements. I think about a year ago you did go over that. What's necessary to use one of the other
for the other courses?
Assessments. No, one of the other assessments, SAT, PSAT, AccuPlacer, etc., as a graduation, as a means of graduation if you've opted out of Parcc. That'd be good to have on hand. Also, I wondered, would it be prudent? I know it's kind of we're pushing the timetable at this point, but would it be prudent to do some quick research, both with a survey at the website and a survey sent email to parents? And I ask this because I'm concerned that we're actually missing a student achievement opportunity and a financial opportunity. And I say this because I know personally of people who've taken various math courses either in other districts over the summer, or Newark Academy, which is very expensive, or MKA, which is very expensive. And those students, even after taking those courses, still had to pass some sort of assessment here in order to be able to use those credits. And usually the purpose was to get ahead. And I feel like we're underserving that population, that segment. And that would be anywhere from pre-algebra to algebra 2 missing, calculus. There are a number of students, I know, the students in 7th or 8th grade who are very advanced in math, they may be taking algebra 2, geometry, or calculus, even calculus. So as well as those in ninth grade who want to get ahead. So I think that we're missing a potential student achievement opportunity there for those who want to get ahead. Number two, and while graduation rates are one of our primary metrics or outcomes that helps to measure our success and impacts our ratings and rankings, et cetera, the ability to help more students get into high school honors courses or to prep to take AP courses, especially at a point where, in some cases, like for physics, we've added a step where you have to take certain math prerequisites, then take honors physics before getting into AP physics. So if we give our kids a chance to prepare further in advance for those who really aspire to do that, I believe, once again, that's a student achievement opportunity missed. And for middle schoolers who may be, let's say they're interested in math and science, but currently, while we're fixing the track, we're doing the math, we have a pretty intensive math committee going on right now. If they miss getting into honors algebra for 7th grade, even if they're great in science, they may not be able to be on the track then to make it into IMS. So once again, from a student achievement standpoint, I feel like we're missing potential opportunities. And the only way to potentially quantify those opportunities is to, one, find out how many kids have done this, say, past summer. Two, how many kids would like to, if that opportunity is available, do it this summer. Research. And second, along those same lines, are we missing a revenue opportunity? I'm glad revenue's built into the equation for this already. However, if we had an idea, we know, for instance, granted, Bloomfield folks are now going to go to the Northern Region services, but you provide the board with some stats indicating that 40% of those who did register in Bloomfield before were from outside the district. If we knew what the kids outside the district wanted, what they're looking for, or how many of these kids are going to an MKA or Newark Academy, and if they can take a higher level course with us, and we can benefit from that from a revenue standpoint, that should be built into the equation. Now, I hear what you're saying, that, okay, this is the first step, and as we go along, if we find out that there's interest, that we can add on other courses. But there's only one way to find out if there's interest, and that's to do some research, or to pull some existing data from looking at how many kids are registered in these other programs, both private as well as public, for higher level courses in math. Math tends to be one of the key areas. And in addition to looking at that research to both address the student achievement needs and address the revenue opportunities, as well as what we're already addressing with the graduation rates, we have an opportunity once again to, from a math standpoint, to address that math continuum, that math pathway that we're already in the process of revamping. So I think if we could get some data, we could make some even better decisions that offer more opportunity for student achievement and for revenue.
Sure. So I think this is a great first step. I think we need to really consider where we are with looking at our data, where our students are, and beginning with this credit recovery piece. Definitely throughout this year we can do the interest survey, do our research, and really consider the acceleration. It is a different track and it's almost double the hours, so we have to consider our budget with that and really understand what those implications are. We can look at all of the courses that were mentioned today and look at the interests of students in our neighboring district and what might they be interested in taking, count up the cost, if you will, and then plan for that accordingly. Right now, I think this is within our budget step, within our resources step, and then as we plan, we can bring that data and that research to the board, and then the board can decide how it would like to invest for the future year. But we can most certainly expand upon the program with acceleration. We're just beginning with credit recovery.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further?
Nope.
Okay. I want to hear comments and questions from the public now. So if anyone, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Calavano will work the clock. We moved the location.
Hi, thank you. Robin Iserlis, 22 Yale Terrace. You just mentioned the attendance policy was they could not miss more than one class. So my first question is what happens if a student doesn't pass or becomes ineligible because of attendance? Second, I didn't hear anyone ask about a class cap. So is there a class cap? How many students would be allowed in each class? And will priority be given to West Orange students over out of district? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gina Velasquez, 22 Corwell Circle. Just a suggestion for an alternative to just the credit recovery would be maybe SAT, PSAT boot camp, which does, bring in a revenue, or yet they have to pay for that, so it wouldn't be a cost from the school. And also, I think it would be an incentive so that summer school isn't known just for the kids that need help. It would be maybe a marketing addition.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Caledra McCormick, 62 Nestor Road. 3 points. One, to Mr. Robinson's point of the different abilities of students. Having kids in the class who can catch on to topics more quickly would benefit the students who've obviously demonstrated that they have difficulty with it. So in putting them together, they'll be able to potentially help each other out, and that will raise the students who have shown they have difficulty. The second point is for kids who are just squeaked by. So I have a kid right now with a D-. So he's not going to be eligible, but I'm considering putting him in another program over the summer. It'd be great to put him in here because he's going to need this for the science and the physics. But at what level do you allow kids? Like, is it up to the D, or at what point? Go ahead. No,
not yet.
All right, I'm sorry. The last point is the out of district kids who come in. Do they need to? I know that there was going to be a handbook, but do they need to demonstrate also a need or ability, or a need of having failed the class before as well, or could they be those kids who want to take that step up and kind of do the advanced classwork?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Michaela Bennett, 35 Old Indian Road. So thank you for the work and the effort looking at the data. I'd encourage you to take it just a step further. And instead of looking at everything from a reactive fail model, turn it into a proactive success model so that you're offering, you know your students. So you know the students who might run the risk of not succeeding. And rather than putting a student in a situation where they fail in order to get into this program, offer them the opportunity, an efficiency model, a proactive model, where they can do these sorts of, the boot camp was a good idea, but they can do these sorts of interventions in advance of testing so that you have higher rates of success the first time around.
Thank you. Anyone further? We'll close that portion of the meeting and turn over to Ms. Williams.
Sure. Regarding the cap, we did not put a cap on it because if we have at least a section, and again, Mr. Moore was hesitant to give a number, but if we have a section with a significant number of students, you saw that our ELA was 8 students currently, so we would run that course. Would our students be given priority? Absolutely. They would be registered first, and then whatever seats are left. However, if there are students from out of district who want to pay, we could add additional section, and so then that might not prohibit us from either. Regarding the auditing the class, a student who'd like to sit through a class, and what is the current cutoff? The current cutoff is if a student did not pass. However, there's nothing prohibiting us, if there is space, from having a student audit that class. So they could just sit through the class in order to gain additional confidence with the course and the content area so that they will be successful in the future. We can also, in the future, think about just having auditing classes. So that they can, any student who wants to, they can participate in that type of feature. For the out-of-district, I think the question was if they passed the course but did not pass the park, could they come to us just to take the park? The answer is no. The state requires them to sit through the course in order to be eligible to sit through the park. So it's a combination. No student is allowed to sit for the park without also sitting for the refresher course. For the efficiencies and interventions during the year, the high school team has been talking about the possibilities of building credit recovery in through the year and what that might look like. So while I give some suggestions, they're not decided on, but it could look like a zero period. It could look like intervention throughout the day. It could look like a boot camp or an after-school program where we're getting credit recovery by marking period, so that we're not waiting until the end. And so then all of those different strategies are being discussed. I think the one that I didn't discuss was the SAT, PSAT boot camp. I think we had something like that.
Well, we do have an SAT boot camp that runs 2 weeks before the test. We don't have a PSAT boot camp. I do understand, I do believe it was it Mr. Robinson that brought it up, that said, is there anything other than just the park to market it with, but would you be able to market it with one of these other alternative assessments to the graduation requirement? I mean, we can look at that. It was not in the thoughts, I'll be honest with you, when we were coming up with it. We were just really, there was a few things in mind. Cost is in mind. Also, making our students a priority and looking at where in our school did we have most of our need. So we did not look at that, but that is something I can take back and consider. Thank you.
Can you just address when students don't, when they take more time than one, and also the idea about an out-of-district student needing to prove that he or she did not do well in the class in the school they're currently in?
Sure. With regard to the number of hours, the state dictates those hours, and so then if the student does not meet the 60-hour requirement, he is not eligible to get credit for that class. So then that student would be informed, you're absent once, you cannot be absent again. If you do, you will not be receiving credit for this course, and that is a state requirement that's out of our hands. I forgot the second question. The student would have to bring their transcript and then show that they need the credit recovery, and then that would satisfy that part of eligibility. And then again, we're meeting with other districts to see what other pieces they have in place in order to receive students from out of district.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Alpert? Mr. Schwartzbaum? Mr. Robertson?
Just one more. In terms of maximizing the revenue opportunity, had you thought about how you intend to market it to other districts?
Well, the honest answer for me is I was just thinking about our kids here. I'll tell you from me, but I can definitely sit down with Mr. Rutsky and Ms. Mendez and discuss that and see how that would work. I would definitely want to sit with the high school team and come out and figure out how we would structure that, frame it, and all those good things so that everyone kind of has an idea of everything on the table. And cost and so forth, I'll probably leave to Mr. Rutsky and Ebony to guide me a little bit on that, because I did not think about that part, to be honest with you, Mark, at this point. Okay. Just about West Orange kids, sorry.
Understood. Also, just kind of want to reassert a point that because we have a little bit of time, even if we got a survey out tomorrow, not saying that it will happen tomorrow, but ASAP and posted at the website, but also had the schools, middle school and high school, e-blasted to parents just on interest. If we offer this course in summer school, which of the following are you interested in enrolling your child in? And then you can check off for what reason. Is it to get ahead? Is it to catch up? Is it to reinforce because your child may be struggling at a certain level? We can get some data, because my real concern is that this is, of the summer school programs I'm aware of, this is, while I understand what it was originally developed for, very, very narrow in scope and has the opportunity to meet more needs as well as gain more revenue. So maybe Mr. Alper and I can help you in terms of coming up with some suggestions from the PR committee in terms of marketing it, because we definitely will need to do that to get the revenue opportunity. Otherwise, those who've had programs out there longer, who already built some recognition, some awareness, will get it first. And while we want to help our kids first, revenue would be really, really nice. We've seen how this summer enrichment program with our own kids has done very well with revenue. So, you know, and revenue would allow us to add on, to build, to expand, to meet more needs, feed achievement, all that great stuff.
I just want to point one thing out in regard to revenue. Even if we had 50 out-of-district children, it would only be $17,000. I'm not minimizing $17,000, but in a budget that's $160 million, we need to put dollars in perspective. So it's, yes, there's an opportunity, but the dollar range is very limited. So it's, I wouldn't put a lot of effort, at least from my perspective, putting a lot of effort into something that is very minimal from a dollar perspective. I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Mr. Rutsky, let's continue on with the superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. Thank you, Mr. Moore. You can just stick around for a little while, please. Thanks. Okay, let me just give you the calendar real quick. We discussed the calendar because we needed to make an adjustment based on the April 19th half-day. So it's coming around. The only revision to this would be if you look at April the 19th, we needed to add in, we lost 2 parent-teacher conference days, and based on the buildings indicating they feel they can do the parent-teacher conference in one day, we put the 19 back in so that the April 19th will be a early dismissal for our elementary students so the teachers can go ahead and move forward with their parent-teacher conferences. That's the only revision to the calendar. Okay?
Any questions, comments from the board?
Now, you know, I wish we didn't have to do it with such short notice, but I also realize, you know, the later you wait to do a conference, the less point there is to doing the conference.
That's exactly what it is, Mr. Hopper, that, you know, we want to try to get this in sooner so there's more time for progression the rest of April, all of May, and the portion of June. So, and then what gets really tough is the district calendar gets very hard as you move into May and June to find a day that really has the least amount of impact.
Okay, thank you.
So while the HIB report is coming around, I'll just mention 2 dates. May 7th, which is our next board meeting, we have the budget presentation, the final budget presentation, followed by an update on the special education audit. So both of those will be on May 7th. And then speaking to Mr. Charles, we've designated May 21st as student recognition ceremony for all of our students and staff across the district. And that will be held in the West Orange High School auditorium, not here. It'll be done in the auditorium. We have a couple of performances that are going to happen, so it'll be done in the auditorium.
If I can just jump in there, that's district-wide, all grade levels, staffing, it's clubs, it's music, it's sports, it's a night to highlight our students and our staff in the district, right? I think is a good thing.
That's correct, yes.
And it will be televised.
Yes. It's a regular board, set-up board meeting. So yeah, it's already scheduled. Any questions on the HIB report?
I have none.
Okay, and I just want to compliment the staff and the students at In the Heights play that was this past week, Thursday, Friday, Wednesday. They had the senior citizens, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was just tremendous, and the kids were outstanding, and the adults who were helping them, there were many of them doing it, really did a very, very fine job. So just want to compliment all of them. There's a lot of things, but just that's the one most important one right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is questions from the public on agenda items. This is just questions or comments on something that appears on the agenda tonight. Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and Mr. Calavano will work the clock.
somebody in the speaker?
Why don't you move it towards you a little bit?
Yeah.
So you want over there?
Yeah, we moved it on you now. It's keeping everybody on their toes.
Michaela Bennett, 35 Old Indian Road. I just had two questions about the HIB report. Mr. Rutsky, how many of those investigations were you responsible for conducting, number one? And number two, how many of those involved employees harassing, intimidating, or bullying students at the school?
Thank you. Anyone further? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that portion. Mr. Rutsky.
Yes, let me just review it very quickly here. The way the HIB process happens is that you either note the principal and the person who is the coordinator in the building, a specialist, is notified either by writing, somebody telling them, a teacher feeling it needs to be done, etc. So when that happens, the building principal and the specialist work to do the investigation. They follow the law, do whatever needs to be done, and then it's determined whether it is founded or unfounded as far as the law of HIB. As far as me, I don't do any investigations. There's only the building specialist and the building coordinator. And again, the coordinator is usually the principal and the specialist is usually the counselor, but there are some other individuals in those buildings. The employees, employees who are harassing, intimidating, or bullying students in the school, none of those are part of this HIB report.
Any comments from the board? Okay. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. I need a motion for Section A, Personnel, with the addendum. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Calavano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. I need a motion now for curriculum and instruction with the addendum.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion from the board? Seeing none, Mr. Calavano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper?
Just on item number 3, for the extraordinary, for the tuition, the additional at the Phoenix Center, can you just elaborate what that dollar amount relates to?
The $3,928. The state comes back and bills the district if tuition is higher, if the place adjusts their rate for that year. So this is one of those that we owe the Phoenix Center $3,928 from the 16-17 year.
So any of the out-of-district placements could potentially come back at some subsequent time and have a retroactive adjustment?
Unfortunately so, yes. And the state is looking into that because a lot of us have said it's completely unfair that we're budgeting for a certain number and then they can raise the rate and we have no vote in what that rate is.
It's usually 2 years after the school year closes. And it works the opposite way too, that we're entitled to a refund if their cost per pupil is less, but we rarely see a refund.
I don't think we're seeing it. We don't see it.
Okay, Mr. Calavano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes.
President Charles, before we go on to the next section, on Business Office B2, it's the agreement with Sussex County Regional Transportation Co-op. Can we add, in addition to athletics and special education, can we add regular education students too? Because they, general ed, because they do our non-public.
Okay. Any objections from the board?
None.
None? Okay, let's add that, please, Mr. Calavano. Any further discussion from the board on finance? Seeing none, Mr. Calvano?
We just need somebody to move it now.
Okay, so.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Calvano?
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. I need a motion to move Section D on the agenda, reports.
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Calvano, let's vote.
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. Need a motion to move Section E, miscellaneous, with the addendum. Motion on that?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, we should describe, just talk about that a little bit. Did you want to do that, or Mr. Alper?
Mr. Alper, want to talk about it a little bit? About the work you did and Mr. Robertson?
Sure, absolutely. So last regular meeting, Ms. Iserles came to us with this resolution that School Boards Association had posted about gun control and mental health services to protect our youth. We looked at that. We sent it out to the board attorney to look over, filled in our legislator names, and we have it here today to be passed.
Just want to thank Ms. Iserles for that.
Absolutely.
Bring that to our attention.
We should read it.
Would you like to read it?
We should read it.
We could, sure.
We should, okay, you know what,
It's important.
Ken, if you don't mind.
Sure. A resolution on gun control and mental health services to protect our youth. Whereas a prerequisite to student growth, learning, well-being, and success is a safe and secure school environment. And whereas children throughout the nation have been negatively affected directly and indirectly by violent crimes involving firearms. And whereas military-style assault weapons and large-volume ammunition magazines were used in recent mass killings in schools and other locations. And whereas profiles of school shooters illustrate the need for a thorough examination of the care and treatment of the mentally ill and for effective intervention. Whereas the New Jersey School Boards Association 2014 study, What Makes Schools Safe, cited reports by state and federal agencies which found that mental health intervention did not take place prior to 3/4 of school shootings. And whereas New Jersey has had among the strongest gun control laws in the nation and the lowest incidence of gun-related deaths, but protective laws are not in place in many other states or at the federal level. And whereas the tragedies of Parkland, Florida, of Newton, Connecticut, of Columbine High School in Colorado emphasize the need to address access to firearms and the delivery of mental health services. Now therefore it be resolved that the West Orange Board of Education in the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, urges President Trump and Congress to identify and implement meaningful action to address action to and ownership of military-style assault weapons and ammunition, the delivery of mental health services, and financial support to ensure a safe and secure school climate. And be it further resolved that the West Orange Board of Education supports Governor Murphy's call to end the, quote, epidemic of gun violence that plagues far too many of our communities, end quote, and supports enhancements to state law that will provide protection for our schools and communities. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to President Trump, U.S. Senator Robert Menendez, U.S. Senator Cory Booker, U.S. Representative Donald Payne Jr., U.S. Representative Rodney Frelinghuysen, Governor Murphy, State Senator Richard Cody, Assembly Representative Mila Jacey, Assembly Representative John F. McKeon, the New Jersey School Boards Association, and the National School Boards Association.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Alper. Mr. Calvano, if once we vote on, would you please ensure that each of the representatives, as the clerk sends it out to them? Appreciate that. Okay, let's vote. Do you want to comment?
Yes.
Oh, go right ahead.
I just want to comment that I had the opportunity to hear students from Parkland speak at a recent event last Friday. Senator Cory Booker introduced 2 students from Parkland to speak at the Mayfair Farms, and they were quite moving. After the event, one of the students actually came over to me and said that he heard they announced my name and said that I was on the Board of Ed, and he wanted to make sure that the Board of Educations across the country do not turn our schools into airports or anything like a jail or something. So he was encouraging us not to go to the extreme and to try to listen to the students and from Parkland. Thank you.
Mr. Schwartzbaum, anything?
No.
Mr. Robertson, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, let's vote. Mr. Calvino?
Mr. Alper?
Yes.
Mrs. Mordecai?
Yes.
Mrs. Schwartzbaum?
Yes.
Vice President Robertson?
Yes.
President Charles?
Yes. Okay, now, next section is reports from the board members. Mr. Alper, anything?
Not much going on this weekend, I don't think. Nobody really did anything, right? Just, that play, I guess, right?
Yes.
So, like I think everyone else in town, I was at the play Saturday night. It was amazing all around. The acting, the singing, the dancing, everything on the tech side also was just, wonderful. And it's, I said on Facebook, and I'll say it again, it's just such a testament to our amazing arts programs throughout the district, and I'm just really very proud of all of our students and staff. And, thanks to everyone who came and saw it.
Okay. Ms. Mordecai?
I also attended the play on Saturday night, so I won't repeat what he just said. But I think it's also a testament to the new dance program that we started a few years ago, both Dance 1, 2, and Advanced. So I could actually see that, and I noticed that our dance instructor was highlighted in the credits at the end of the program. So it's very good to see that the dance program is also being used as a part of our performing arts. One other thing, I think Mr. Charles asked me to speak to this. For a few years, I've been asking for the board to have a student representative on the board. So to that end, I have gone to a couple of the districts who currently have student representatives to talk about that. I'm going to be bringing a policy before the board on May 7th regarding that. A couple of districts that I talked to, they have slightly different ideas of what that looks like. Some districts have one representative, some districts have two, an alternate just in case the other student can't make it. And in some cases, both students attend the board meetings. So I'm going to take a look at all those policies and try to come up with one that suits West Orange. Because in some cases, they have kids from 9th grade through 12th grade, and some districts have only juniors and seniors. So we have to think about what that looks like and maybe talk to Mr. Moore or the student government to see exactly how we could implement that without disrupting the student's schedule. Because I know with block scheduling and all the extracurricular and co-curricular activities and college searches, I can't imagine that they have any time to come and sit here with all of us. So I'll be reporting back to the board on May 7th.
Okay. I want to publicly thank you for all your work on that. It's something
welcome.
that I thought we wanted to get done this month of April, so I appreciate all, and speak for the rest of the board, all your work on getting the feedback, speaking to our colleagues throughout New Jersey.
Yeah, quite a few have it. Plainfield, Westwood, South Orange, Maplewood, Somerville, Woodbury. So,
Okay. Seems
so
like,
I'll compare all the policies and see what works for us.
Okay, look forward to your report next meeting. Mr. Schwartzbaum, anything?
Just want to congratulate all the actors and everyone in the play. I also had the opportunity to attend a conference on opioids and other uses of substances. One of the very disturbing things that was pointed out, and something that a lot of the schools are addressing, are the use of vapors and e-cigarettes within the schools, and to utilize the SROs and really try to curtail, because as across the nation, cigarettes smoking, tobacco use is down to 7%, and this is really causing a very big increase, and the various implications and medical issues in regarding to using vapors that are really not safe and quite harmful.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robertson, anything?
Like my colleagues, I attended In the Heights on Saturday, and I have to say that one of the comments that I heard and what I felt myself is that you forget that you're at a, quote, high school production. Our production was so professionally executed, the complexity of the dance routines, the complexity of the singing, the fantastic acting, the sound design, the lighting, and the costumes. Everything was at such a high level of sophistication. A paper mill playhouse look at it. That was really fantastic. And I heard from one of the parents that there was apparently a friend of a parent who was a Broadway critic there, who said something similar, that they forgot that they were at a high school production. So I think this is a testament to our teachers, it's a testament to the tremendous talent among our students, and I think that we need to promote this. We need to make sure that theater programs, that the top theater programs at colleges know about our students and know about our program. Maybe even consider inviting them to attend some shows and producing some sort of promotional material about our theater and productions, because it's really at such a high level that we need to promote it, we need to talk about it. Also, in regard to having a student representative or student representatives on the board, you know, looking at the number of students who've come up to the mic over the past few years, and I see a bunch of students we have here tonight, I think that, you know, our students have already shown that they have the willingness to be, to really express their voice, to be activists, to be involved, and I think that a student voice, a student perspective can really help to inform the board. Even as students learn more about what the board does, I think that their perspective can really help to inform ours, and I look forward to that.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to extend my congratulations to the students and staff for a wonderful, wonderful play. Next on the agenda are petitions and hearings from the citizens on any matter. Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and Mr. Calavano will work the clock.
Jacob Klausner, 21 Sheffield Terrace. Hello everyone, my name is Jack Klausner and I'm a freshman here at the West Orange High School. A couple weeks ago, the guidance counselors started calling kids down to the guidance office, especially kids enrolled in the IH and IMS programs, telling them that they had to alter their schedules in order to make room for a new mandatory SAT preparation class for the 2018 to 19 school year. These students, including myself, already have to take a mandatory elective to fit the guidelines of their institute. So what this course is doing is forcing some students to have to drop their art and or music classes. And also some students are planning to take AP Statistics or Java or other full year courses, which they can no longer do. So of course this caused a panic throughout the IH and IMS student body, and after collecting some information, we've come here to protest the mandatory, like the fact that this class is mandatory. The program of studies describes the class as a mandatory course that students may elect to take in either the second semester of sophomore year or first semester of junior year. Students who earn a score of 550 on the PSAT in both the reading, writing, and math sections may elect to waive this course. This course is not credited towards the mathematics requirement for graduation. When I first read this after the day when they were calling people down, I was surprised to see that it said that kids could take it junior year, but as we soon learned, the guidance counselors are not allowing us to take it, whether that be from the administration or just from their own judgment, we're not sure. But they said that we have to take it sophomore year, not junior year. And so as a solution to this issue, I would suggest that students should be able to opt out of taking this class with parental consent, because the scores for the PSAT don't get back until the middle of sophomore year. So students already have to take 2 half-year courses instead of a full-year course, which they might be wanting to take. As a final note, I organized this protest, but I didn't do it because personally I had to take it, because I already took the SAT and I can already waive the class. But I organized this protest because I wanted to show that I really cared about these students and try to make a difference, something that I hope the board can recognize. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Sorry, this was Elizabeth Redwine, 10 Cobain Terrace. And this is a kind of a group effort that I made on the phone with a bunch of parents who couldn't be here tonight. So I want to make sure, I don't like to read off my phone, but I just want to make sure I say exactly what we had kind of agreed. So we were happy to hear in both the last board meeting and in a letter that went home that the board, or that was posted, that the board is interested in forming parent committees with the community And so there's been a lot of discussion in the community. You probably, or you may be aware of this, but around issues related to suspensions and detentions at the elementary school, starting as early as 2nd grade. And dress code crackdowns are a part of this issue. And you're probably aware of this, but published data reports that 9% of our high school students get suspended annually. So we just wanted to say that many of the parents that I've been speaking to hope to have the opportunity to visit these issues in one of these committees. So we would just love to be able to form a committee with the board dealing with questions around discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I promise I'm done after this. Michaela Bennett, 35 Old Indian Road. 2 things. First, May the 4th is St. Cloud School's 5th grade fundraiser, Night of Hoops. We've outgrown the Liberty School gym, and we will be in the Tarnoff gym this year. This year's theme is going to be an all-star edition. We already have commitment from a former NBA player, former WNBA player, and I would encourage you all to attend. And we have a sign-up genius and really need sign-ups because we're going to have a bunch of the baskets in use for the kids to be utilizing. So if any of you would like to sign up, if anybody has some extra knowledge about dunking, we're going to have a dunk contest, and it would be nice to have one of you as one of our judges. So I'm organizing this year. I've been involved for the past 3 years. It's the last year, and I would encourage you all to consider coming out and supporting volunteering. That was the good news.
What time does it start?
I'm sorry, it's 7 to 9.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The not so good news, 339 days ago, I met with Mr. Rutsky and brought to his attention the harassment, intimidation, and bullying of 70 students, all the entire 4th grade class at St. Cloud School. It's been 339 days, and I received no response from him about that incident, what I raised with him, what he did, follow up. I did receive recently a letter from him about an incident that the incident date is March, first week in March, and that there has been an investigation of the harassment, intimidation, and bullying of the entire 4th grade class, and that he personally did the investigation, and it's closed. I know of no investigation that doesn't take statements that are signed. I know of no investigation that doesn't ask for evidence that has been announced to have had. I know of no investigation that has no file. I know of no investigation that has no notes. I know of no investigation about the abuse of 70 students that doesn't involve the state. I brought this to all of your attention, and I hope that you're all very clear that until this is addressed in a professional and appropriate way, I won't stop. I won't. So I now have due process rights that have been afforded to me, and today was the 10th day, and the day that you should have provided me with my hearing according to Mr. Rutsky's letter, and of course none of you knew about that. I just encourage you to follow process and procedure and be the sort of board that we can all be proud of.
Thank you.
Robin Iserlitz, 22 Yale. I wanted to support the students here who are dismayed by the decision to have a mandatory SAT class. I was here for that decision and the vote by the board, and at the time I raised some concerns, and I was concerned that the board did not adequately discuss the mandatory provision, especially disregarding how this would impact this current 9th graders and their choice of electives. I actually do think it would be a good thing to have an option for an SAT class so that people wouldn't have to rely upon the private marketplace, but I don't think it should be mandatory. I wonder if there would be consideration to make this an elective, just like the many other wonderful electives that our students have the option to take. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Hello.
I'm Lisa Bennett, 34 Mountain Avenue. I'm in here for support of the students. They're also here about the mandatory SAT course. My main concern is, and I'm here primarily due to principal. I have a child who's a 9th grader, and he's an IMS, but I'm here to support all of the students because this isn't a state mandate. It's not required for graduation. It should be offered as an optional elective. SATs, it's becoming, a lot of schools are moving away from an SAT as a requirement to get into college or an optional requirement. So I just think that there are a lot of other things that a student has to deal with in choosing their courses, and it should be up to the parent if their child is going to take an SAT prep course. If you want to offer as an elective and it's an optional elective, that's great. But to tell me as a parent that my child is supposed to take a mandatory course that is going to keep him from taking orchestra, no, it's not going to happen. I can tell you right now, I'll fight you to the death for that. So that's just not going to happen. And I'm also questioning where was the parent input when considering making this mandatory. And if there was parent input, were these parents aware that this would cause scheduling problems, especially for the IMS and IHS students? Because it's a nightmare. And the other thing I want to point out is the same kids that you're putting this upon freshman year now are the kids who have always been screwed around with. They got messed up with the math stuff, and they got messed up with all these other things. They've always been the experimental kids. And don't do this to them again. They've had enough to deal with. They've all been in crisis mode for the past month because of this scheduling stuff. It's just not right, and it's not fair. And you're telling me my kid who's been playing viola since 4th grade, that, to be honest, is going to have a better shot of getting him into a college than probably his SAT scores. Okay, so it's just ridiculous, and if you want to give it as an option, that's terrific, but making it mandatory, my kid's not going to have to take it. I'll tell you that right now, because there's no way, and I know a lot of other parents who feel the same way. It's just not the right thing to do. So that's my piece.
Thank you. Next.
How you doing? Tom Volshow, 40 Overlook Avenue. It's recently come to my attention that in Teaneck, New Jersey, on the night of June 12th, 2002, the principal was arrested for molesting a 17-year-old student. And Mr. Rutsky would know this case very well because he was your boss, and it was covered in the New York Times. And so this is my concern, is that there's a major breakdown of investigative procedures with this Board of Education. And I want to know what happened in Teaneck, what went wrong, what went right, and what can be done better. So to give you some what's going on here is that the principal of the Teaneck High School had a 17-year-old student living in his house. He would go in at nighttime and touch him. The principal was arrested after a school function. I don't know if Mr. Rutsky was there, he can tell you. He was found not guilty. My read is that Teaneck did a big cover-up because 3 years later, he was charged with the exact same thing, and this time he stepped down. And then 2 years later, the first victim sued him. Now, it looks like what happened in Teaneck, my read, is that they were obsessed with public relations. They covered for this principal, and it bit them in the ass. And so I'm very concerned about the public relations obsession with this Board of Education. You issued a letter recently, the top of your list was public relations. Public relations is just the word that Edward Bernays substituted for the term propaganda. Edward Bernays, I'm a professor, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he was the chief propagandist, one of the chief propagandists in the United States. So you're using a term, public relations, that is all about perception management, which means that you don't recognize that there are real problems, severe problems at this Board of Education. There are issues with fraud, embezzlement, waste, abuse, and I can go on even further. And you know because I've produced an eyewitness. And you've seen the email, the uncomfortable email I had to write. I didn't come up with that rumor. I didn't even believe that rumor. I went out and investigated it myself and was able to find somebody who was there. And that was amazing to me. And you still haven't gotten back to me on that one. And that's a disturbing case. I won't get into it anymore because I know you're going to say it's a personnel issue. which is fine. I also worry that there's issues with cronyism, favoritism, funny contracts being given out. And I have evidence, I have documents, I have a big file. So I would play very carefully and I would start to be honest. Because if you don't, there's a couple newspaper reporters that really want to write a story. And I'm not talking about the Star Ledger. It's much bigger than that. Thank you very much. I know it was uncomfortable, but thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Barbara Bronstein, 15 Blackburn Terrace. I'm another parent that's concerned about the mandatory SAT prep. My children came home extremely upset that their planned trajectory was going to be changed. They already took freshman seminar, which already ate up like a full year elective they could have had that they had to turn into a half. Now it was going to happen again, and they would be impacted in, you know, many of, depending on which of the two are there, whether it be arts or a more advanced science. And I wrote in, I spoke to guidance, and I've said that I will not allow them to change their schedule for their sophomore year, and we'll wait on the PSATs. And if this was going to be an implemented program, it should have started with the incoming class. There's a 9th grade PSAT that could have been implemented, and there'd be real scores that could tell whether a student was really in need of the class. And for my students, if we find that there'll be an actual need, which I doubt whether they will be below the 550, but if it is, I will take care of it with a private SAT prep class. I don't want to impact their music, their art, or their advancement in math or science, which I have twins, so that's in their plan. So I'm not just speaking for myself. There's other parents that I've been in touch with. There's been a lot of talk. If you watch the 411 and things on Facebook groups, and people that would have been here and maybe are out of town, but my children feel very strongly, and so do many parents in the district, and it's especially the IH and the IMS with limited electives that seem to be impacted the most. So that's why we're here, and there's many of us here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gina Velasquez, 22 Corwell Circle. First, I just want to mention this will be for the second year. We're doing a fundraiser for Parcc Scholarship Fund, and I know I got some support from several of you last year, and we're looking for more support, and donations are welcome. It's on the same night, I believe, as the other fundraiser, May 4th, Friday night. I'm not sure if it was May 4th, but luckily it's right across the street from here, and it's at the Cats, so you guys can hit both of them. That would be great. It's 6 to 10. It's a paint and sip, and we'll have fun. Come get some wine, then come over to the hoop thing. Great. Or vice versa. Vice versa. Yeah. That's it. But whatever. I hope to see you guys, and it would be great if you can attend both. Another thing, other than that, I've been doing some intensive training with SPAN for the last several weeks, and I just want to mention on a new law that was passed by Governor Christie. It was a new restraint and seclusion law signed by Governor Christie on January 16th, which took effect immediately. And what it is, it's basically emphasizes restraint and seclusion for students with disabilities. So I just want to know if you guys are implementing new policies, what your policy is, and where you guys are going with that going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Paulina Acosta, 112 Longview Street. And I came here to today with many other freshmen in IH and IMS for the protest today. And this is just a small portion of us. There's actually a lot more that planned on coming, but due to sickness and other activities, such as a big project tomorrow, and many of us are actually here even instead of work on the project because because we care a lot about this. And then because I know the day that we got called down to the guidance office, nobody was happy because in our freshman seminar, IH freshman seminar, everybody started talking about it and nobody was happy because because we're kind of extra and we planned for the next 4 years. And then our plans for the next 4 years kind of got messed up with the implementation of the SAT prep courses, such as prerequisites, we want to take AP classes or honors classes, or other specialized courses such as Java, and we have to take prerequisites, but now our plans for that has gotten messed up. And yeah, and next year I have to take personal finance plus my IH mandatory course plus now this SAT course. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Victoria Brazos, 9 Winfield Street. I'm in IH and I'm also here with all these freshmen protesting the SAT prep classes. And personally, I had to switch out public speaking, which is a class that would definitely help me with a lot of life skills in order to make room for this class in my schedule. And that's just an example of how it's unfair to people who want to take courses that are going to help them just grow as a person and feed their interests in order to make room for this class. Plus, we already have to take personal finance in our high school time, and for if you're in an institute, you already have to take a class according to your institute. So we already have these mandatory classes, and just adding one is just taking away from our freedom to choose our own courses. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
McCormick, 62 Nestor Road. Similar to the IH and IMS, ROTC students also have that mandatory class. Didn't hear them come and speak tonight, but I know that some of them have said that to me over the past week or two. For the kids who are not on the track of going to college, but are, have other aspirations, putting them in a mandatory SAT class may not be the best use of their time. So please consider that for the certain percentage of the students in the high school that it's not going to serve. Thanks.
Thank you. Next.
Nicole Fenske, 13 Sunnyside Road. I know a lot of kids from IH and IMS are here, but even the kids that aren't taking those classes or ROTC, my daughter has her high school career planned out. She knew when she was taking art, when she was taking all her requirements, and now you throw this into a class that's already taken freshman SEM when you know the class coming in, you took away freshman SEM. So make that mandatory for them and not this class that already took freshman SEM.
Thank you. Next.
Lisa Bassini-Asman. I would just like to ask the board if there is going to be a committee formed that's going to talk about discipline, suspensions, detentions, that I'm going to assume, but you never want to assume, that teachers and administrators would be part of that committee. I happen to have the Gregory Handbook in front of me, and in the Gregory Handbook, it does talk about discipline policies. Students learn better in a secure, orderly, and non-disruptive environment. And unfortunately, there's 4 general rules here, very simple for elementary school: listen politely, follow directions. Not always the case, interruptions. Keep hands and feet and objects to yourself. We do have pushing and shoving at times that needs to be addressed. Be courteous and polite to others. Use appropriate language. Respect the rights of others. So these are some policies that we do have. And suspensions do occur. That suspensions are assigned to address severe or continuous misconduct, unacceptable behavior, and or blatant disrespect or defiance to the school's code of conduct. From time to time, it's necessary to suspend a student out of school for serious or continued disregard of regulations. So there are policies in effect. I would love to come to school. I've been here for 31 years, where the kids would sit with their hands folded and I don't have to discipline anybody. But a day like that hasn't occurred in a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone further? Seeing no one, we'll close that portion of the meeting. Mr. Rutsky?
Okay, while Mr. Moore and Mr. Mendez come up to the microphone, the one thing that please come up. The one thing that I heard, which is should not be happening, is that kids are required to take it during 10th grade. We will look into that tomorrow to find out if that is an individual or where that message came from that they had to take it in 10th grade. It was clearly portrayed that it would be offered in 10th grade or the first semester of 11th grade. And again, the idea behind that is giving students the opportunity to have a chance to waive out of the class by taking the PSAT. So that's something we'll definitely look into. And so why don't I just go ahead and turn it over. You can address it a little bit, and then I'll kind of jump in with you as well. Please.
Okay. The SAT, the intent was, it grew out of addressing some of the things that came out of the strategic plan, which was a meeting, a community meeting that took place in which people, which the community informed the board, Mr. Rutsky, school boards and all, some of the things they wanted us to work on. I do not want to sit here and tell you that I'm not the luckiest principal. As you hear my students advocate for themselves in protest, that's because they're terrific students and they do that terrifically. And I know them personally, so I'm very happy to see how well they articulated their points. They make points, there's no question about that, but I do think that that discussion, although brought up, and definitely consider what you're saying, I think I would have to have that discussion with Mr. Rutsky, with Ms. Mendez, and take a look at it, and as of course they would extend that to the board. So I don't want you to think it falls on deaf ears. It doesn't fall on deaf ears. We definitely are listening. I'm not sure what the right answer would be right now, this minute, to say, but the intent was to address a concern that the community had with us not matching the state SAT score, and so it was one of the charges. We had to come up with an idea or some type of course that would address it. We already have an SAT course, so that you know, the SAT course already existed. This is a bolstered up edition with some more technology added to it. But again, like I said to my students, I thank you for coming up. I do hear what you're saying. I think that's a conversation I would have to have with Mr. Rutsky and Mr. Mendez, and you know, talk about some of those concerns that you have and how it's affecting you. Thanks.
Okay. All right. We'll talk a little more as we move through the notes here about the SAT.
Before you move on from the SAT subject, I believe some of the board members had comments.
I'm going to talk about all the notes, and I'm going to come back to the SAT.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to go in order here. Ms. Bennett, you brought up a mention about the 10 days for a hearing, and you are correct. But you indicated that the hearing was not for HIB. So the hearing is for, when you get 10 days, that's for an HIB appeal. You indicated that your email to Mr. Price and his interpretation and the specialist interpretation was that that's what you were requesting, that an investigation be done based on things that were going on, and that's what they did. So the reason you received the letter, and again, that's by law that you received the letter from me, notified by Mr. Price, that the investigation was done and that you have the right to appeal the HIB decision. You're talking about something completely different. And so that's why it does not fit the 10-day. Yes, it is a 10-day, but based on your email prior to, you're saying, no, that's not what I'm talking about. It's not the HIB investigation. So that's the reason you got the letter, because that's part of the protocol. As I indicated to you, we're more than willing to sit down, talk about every issue you have, and do what needs to be done. But as far as things of abuse of 70 students, as you know, we met, I went over and looked at all of the scenarios that were going on, met with the principal, met with the lunch aides, and can't go into too much depth because of personnel matters and confidentiality around that personnel. But we made an adjustment to something that was going on. I invited you. We can certainly sit down and we can do that. And I invited Mr. Charles as well to be part of that as well. As far as Mr. Volskov, yeah, I was at TNEC when the principal was arrested. I happened to be at the event, and yes, I was an assistant principal at that time. Didn't have anything to do with this, or it just was very sad situation that took place. That's for sure, and feeling very bad for those children. But as far as anything else to do with it, not really sure what the purpose of it is. So yes, I was in TNEC at that time. Ms. Asman, I know you've been in the district a very, very long time, and I know that all of you, not only Gregory, but across the district, one of the most important things that we talk about all the time is that a student is never permitted to interrupt another student from learning. And that is very important that everybody understands that. Every student has a right to be in a room that students are being respectful to each other so they can learn. And when students are not being respectful, in whatever form that may be, that has to be addressed by either the teacher or the administration of that building, and I believe they do a very, very good job of doing that. Some of the issues may take place outside of the classroom, and understand that while we love to have recess and kids need to have recess, recess is a privilege. And until it becomes a requirement by the state, which I'm a fan for it becoming a requirement, because I think they need it. The idea is that kids make mistakes at lunchtime. And when they do, there's consequences for those mistakes. And then we give them another try to do it again. If they're held out for a few minutes and then they get another shot, they do it again, they're held out longer, or they're taken away, or whatever. There's consequences for the student making a bad decision. I think the teachers and the administration of the buildings do a very, very fine job with our discipline. And when students are doing things that require suspension, I'm aware of it, and I know what's happening. They all come to me, and I see all of them. So it's important that you realize that things like age-appropriate discipline is what's done. Here in the high school, when students put their hand on each other, they are suspended. It's not okay that another student gets hurt or has an issue or whatever the deal is. Kids need to be in an environment that they feel safe and they know what they're here for, and that is to learn. And when other students take that away, then there's consequences for that, and some of them are very serious consequences. Now, I think I covered everything except for the SAT. The SAT, when I came here, there was a very large conversation for many, many months that SAT, we were not doing well in our overall district SAT scores. That didn't mean that certain students weren't doing well. It meant as a district, we were not doing well with the SAT scores, and we looked at different things that we tried to do. Mr. Moore mentioned we had the SAT boot camp. We were promoting that. Kids had to pay for it. We had other things. We pay for the PSAT. The district pays for every student to take the PSAT, yet we weren't getting every student out to take it. And that's fine, because maybe some students aren't prepared at that time to take it, or their parents don't feel it's important at that time to take it. But there's a lot of things that have been in place, and we felt at this point in time that the progress hasn't been made that we wanted to see made with the SAT scores as a district. So when we were designing the program and we were listening to the administrators and some of the teachers who were teaching it, the idea behind it was we needed to have a waiver for students who didn't really need the course. And that was a very tough decision on what that waiver consisted of, and we went back and forth for many meetings on the waiver piece. What ultimately was decided was the 550 on both. Now, whether I completely agree with that or not has nothing to do with this discussion. It has to do with that the majority of the administrators felt very strongly that that would be the number, the 550, that really showed that kids do not need to take the course. I supported that, and I still support that. The idea behind kids having to take it their sophomore year, I completely disagree with. That's not what we proposed. And the idea is the students who are in the IMS and the IHS could be impacted. We need to look at that. We definitely need to look at that. But again, the point is, if you take the PSAT, you score well on the PSAT and you waive yourself out of it, then you don't need to worry about taking it. If you don't, then we feel as a district it's important for all of our district students in taking the SAT that that course will help them. And then lastly, on the course itself, please understand that there are some very important skills that all students are going to be able to take away from that course, not just for the SAT. It's for them and their learning strategies for 11th grade, 12th grade, college, workforce, whatever it might be. So to think that this is just around taking and passing the SAT and doing as well as we can, of course that's one of them. We want to increase our SAT scores across the district, but the individual learning that's going to happen through the strategies the students are going to learn, in my opinion, is more beneficial to the students than the actual taking of the course. What we will do, as Mr. Moore indicated, is we will go back and we'll have a discussion. We'll pull that committee together, and by May 7th we'll have another discussion. I am not promising you that anything is going to change. When we put things into place, we know, we realize that there are students who are going to be impacted by this, and that I'm sorry for. And unfortunately, the first year is always the hardest year. And so we want to do right by students, and so please don't think about this as this is an SAT course that I don't want my kid to take. There's many more benefits to the actual course and the structure of the course than it is about the ultimate score. All right? Mr. Charles.
Okay, so I know my colleagues have probably tons of questions or comments. The committee's going to go back and take a look at some of these issues. I think the biggest thing is speaking to the guidance supervisor about what's making it mandatory in 10th grade. I think that's something that needs to be done immediately.
No question. That will happen tomorrow.
Okay.
And again, this is the first I've heard of that. Mr. Moore, have you heard anything about this?
No, not making mandatory, but they have an option of 10th or grade.
Right.
11th, and I think what guidance counselors were looking at is...
Come up to the mic for a minute, please.
I don't know, because I wasn't...
I don't want to speak for the guidance counselor, and I'm sure that students' experiences are unique to what has happened, but the intent is that students, and we had discussed that if they had certain things like IH, IMS, if they had taken it in the 10th grade, they could probably be open for the junior APs, anything they needed to do. If it was meant that it had to be mandatory for them, they had an option of 10th or they had an option of 11th to try to fit it in, because we were trying to find a way to perhaps not run into so many things.
Mr. Moore, it sounds like a couple of students that came up that they didn't have the option of discussing possibly 11th grade. So let's just look into that tomorrow.
No, I'll definitely do that. But as I hear them and I know the mandatory nature has been the topic at school and what has been coming up, so I understand.
Right. No, yeah, I understand, I'm not talking about the mandatory needing everybody
Okay.
to take it. I'm talking about that
The 10th
we discussed
graders.
it could be done during 10th grade
Mhm.
or
Or
first
first
semester
and
of 11.
11th grade.
And what I heard tonight is maybe that's
Oh,
not so being told to them.
Gotcha.
So let's just check into that tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I want to hear from my colleagues, I'm sure. Ms. Alpert?
Yeah, I'm real concerned. No one should have to lose orchestra or an AP class or, Java or anything like that for an SAT prep class. And, if there's not a way to move it off to junior year, maybe we need to look at additional waivers or, even if it needs to be mandatory, maybe if there's grades, maybe there's other testing that we can use for waivers where we could get that done earlier or something that predicts a PSAT score.
I just want to add, I know Mr. Rutsky and Mr. Moore said you're going to go back into committee with Mr. Mendez and take a look at it. But I just wanted to add, when this was presented to the board, I know myself and I believe Mr. Robertson, we talked about other options, maybe looking at PSAT even as early as the 8th grade. We talked about 8th grade and 9th grade. So maybe the next time around, maybe next year, I know you have to build that into the program now, or we have to have another discussion about that. But honestly, if kids are eligible and can take it in the 8th grade, then you don't have to worry about this. It is a shame that any kid would miss an elective or not be able to take a prerequisite for an AP or honors class. So thank you for taking a second look at that, but please also look at PSAT at the 8th grade level.
But we discussed the idea behind it in 8th grade and 9th grade and that kind of things, and there were legitimate reasons for it. And I think we need to be careful that we're talking to students that are 13 years old. Yes, there are 13-year-olds
That might be able to take it.
that could take it. We're talking about, we're making decisions based on all students. Okay, so 8th graders taking, we discussed that. We'll go back and have another conversation around that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Schwarzbaum, anything?
Yes. First of all, I want to commend all of you for coming out. I think, if nothing else, that in light of Parkland, that the voices of students and everyone really reverberates throughout, and you really need to, I want to commend all of you, and it's great. You met in life, whether it's this situation or anything else, you may not get the answers you want, but it's very, very important to voice your opinions. I hear what everyone's saying. The idea of having students take an SAT course, I think is very, very important. I think one of the questions that we need to address is it, if it's mandatory, does it have to be only mandatory in the school? And perhaps for certain students that we give the option to say that if you take an SAT course outside of school and you document, fine, you can opt out. It is very, very important, as Mr. Rutsky said. I have 4 children, all who took the SATs, and test taking throughout life doesn't go away. Test-taking strategies are very, very important. So you learn a lot. I can only comment doing PSATs in 7th, 8th grade. You can do it, but by the time you get into high school and all the various types of questions they ask, I'm not an educator, but just as a parent whose children went through it, I'm not sure that they would have a lot of benefit out of it. And especially scores between PSATs to SATs, I only can speak anecdotally for my children and my friends' kids. I saw scores jump, 400 or 500 points between PSATs and SATs due to prep. So I think having a prep course is very, very important, and we need to consider the opting out as some other alternatives, and so this way you can fit it into your schedule.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson.
Okay. First, Jack, Victoria, Pauline, and all the students who came out tonight, I commend you. And thank you for waking us up as to what was going on with you. My son was at IH, and I would have been livid, as would he, had his IH courses been interrupted by another mandatory course and he not been given the opportunity for another decision, whether it's to take it in 11th, etc. So, a couple things. One, it shouldn't be happening to you, okay? Number two, let's look at the reality and then figure out then how we go from there as part of the conversation. Number one, it is true that a lot of colleges don't require the SAT anymore. However, they still accept it. And over 70% of the kids who are applying provide it. So what happens is, if you're vying for a scholarship or to get into a special program, frequently, not always, every college is different, okay? But I'll use Seton Hall and FDU as examples. If you're vying for a scholarship or certain programs, now if you're going to a music program in Binghamton, could be different, totally, all right? But they do look at a standardized criteria. Why? Because admissions offices and program offices have difficulty in telling whether the courses at one high school were equivalent in rigor to the courses at another. Now, you're actually a little bit ahead of the game. If you're an IMS or IH, you're already probably getting college letters in 9th grade or 10th grade. You're getting inquiries around. I know my son did. So you're going to get a lot of consideration early on. But the truth is that if you are college bound, it will help you in most cases to take the SAT and to do well on it. Does that mean it should interrupt your course of study and your key areas of academic interest? No, not necessarily. So number two on the reality, in addition to the college reality, and by the way, Mrs. Redwine is a professor at Seton Hall, I believe. Seton Hall's average applicant has a 1220 combination score on their SATs, their average applicant, and they're not even, I don't know if they're ranked in the top 100. They're an amazing school, but they're average applicant. So the other thing maybe we look at is, if you're stronger in science and you are in English, maybe we look at what the combined score is, because the chances are you're going to score off the Richter scale in math and science, and you may score lower in English. Or if you're stronger in IH, you may score much higher in English than you do in math and science. So maybe one of the options is to look at a combined score, as well as look at other course options and other waivers for the program. Additionally, looking at our high school, we have to worry about for your benefit as well as ours, okay? When we're looking at high school rankings, that factors into how admissions offices look at your application. And one of the only things, two things I've heard are high school rankings. One is SAT scores. I believe that our programs and our teachers and our students are on par in their drive and their passion, their capabilities with those at Milburn. Milburn gets greater recognition and higher ranking SAT scores. And it's not because their programs are better. So we do have to look at, as a high school, how to lift that. Why does it matter? When the admissions officers are looking at your application, they already have a concept in their mind of what schools are some of the top ranked. If you came from Andover or Exeter, whether or not their courses are actually better than some of the ones you're taking, you get a higher level of consideration, also because they've had a pipeline for decades longer. So these are real considerations. We're trying to figure out, work through how to benefit all students, or the majority of students, and there's some tough decisions involved. Now, once again, should it interrupt IMS or IH? No, it should not. Should it interrupt your long-term course objectives? Hopefully not. We've got to figure out how to work through that. So one is maybe looking at combined scores. Two is realizing that if your track to college or to your postgraduate years will not involve the need for a high SAT score, maybe there's another way to approach waivers. Number three is, and I'll have to differ with you, Mr. Rutsky, on this point, I do not feel that we're following best practices. Most of the top schools are taking the PSAT in 9th grade. The college boards instituted a PSAT 8 for data purposes. So kids could take it, you get some data as to where you are falling, especially if you were already on an honors math or English track in 6th through 8th grade. The truth is you're going to have a lot of the prerequisites, you're going to have a lot of that material already. So you take the practice in 8th, you take it for real in 9th, when you take it again in 10th, that's the one that counts towards whether or not you're a National Merit Scholar. But you can start it earlier. We shouldn't be focused on how many kids we get to take the PSAT in 10th and 11th. That's too late. And the other thing is that's changed since the days of Mr. Schwartzbaum's kids is that the PSAT is now much more aligned with the SAT. So it is a much greater indicator of how you're going to do. So one, if we started earlier, you're not dealing with the same decisions and you'll have scores earlier. And the irony is that the IMS and IH students are likely to have the highest scores anyway. So if you're starting the process earlier, you're taking those tests earlier, and you're already these passionate, hungry, and students who are already achieving at a high level. Truth is, you're going to kill it. You're going to kill it anyway. You're going to do well anyway. So we really need to look at those factors. Starting earlier in the process, looking at other avenues potentially towards waivers, looking at a combined score and not just 550 English, 550 math. Maybe it's the combined. And getting more of your feedback, more of the parents' feedback, because we are dealing with a tough reality as to how to lift our rankings as a high school, how to lift our overall student readiness, and that brings them more college opportunities. And the reality that whether or not some schools are saying, oh, you don't need the SAT, they're still accepting them and looking at them, and 70% of the folks you're going up against are providing them. So these are realities. If you're gifted in music, and taking a math or English SAT is not going to be your strong point, and you're going to be able to get into a strong music program, then maybe there's another way that we can offer you a waiver out of this. But consider all these factors and what's going to help you get into college, what's going to help you get into the best college, what's going to help you to get the best shot at grants and special programs. Consider all those things. Next. When we look at Mr. Volshow, a couple things. Guilt by association doesn't go over well. And the thing that you did appropriately bring up that you've already communicated with us about, we are looking into it now, okay? It takes a second. Sorry, it's not going quickly enough. In regard to PR, I'm sorry, we're not Goebbels, okay? This is not propaganda. Part of PR is community relations. So part of that community relations is inviting you folks to the table, you parents to the table to say, hey, we have an issue with discipline, rules, and policies. We have an issue with how communication is occurring. That was the purpose of it. Not just to go out with some BS campaign about, oh, well, these are all the good things we're doing. No, it's to listen to you and to say, here's what we need to look at, here's what we need to do better in, here's some other ways to approach things, and here's what we are saying as parents and community. We need to hear that. We need you at the table for that. Not as a PR stunt, not as an image stunt, but as a real community relations, parent relations effort. And I'm sorry we haven't moved on that yet. We're also in the middle of budget time. And so we're, in the trenches on that. We are going to move ahead with the PR committee, and we are going to be reaching out to you, and we thank you for keeping this top of mind. Now, discipline. A couple of things. There's policy, and there are rules. You have rule books, handbooks at every school. So Mrs. Mordecai and I need to take a step back, along with Mr. Rutsky and the administration, and take a look at, okay, you have the rules for each school, and you have discipline policies. Maybe we need to take a second look at how those are expressed, how those are written, and then the administration, because they run the day-to-day, will look at how they're actually being implemented. But we as a board are supposed to look at policy, and what's the deal with the policy here, and is it properly constructed? So we can take a look back at that. That's part of our bailiwick in terms of responsibilities. Did I address? PSAT, I think I got everything there. And the two events of the same night, I'm not sure I'm all for drinking wine and then going to a dunk contest. Or judging one. Hey, that was pretty good. I think, but we'll work it out. We'll find a way. And also let us know who to write the check to. Is just write a check to WOPAS. If we can't be there, maybe we can still contribute and support it. While also supporting what sounds like an exciting St. Cloud fundraising event. And I'm a basketball guy. I love it. I love it. Those were my comments, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Mr. Charles?
Yes, ma'am.
If I could just add something to what Mr. Robertson said. In addition to those policies, we have to take a look at the policy that Mrs. Velasquez brought up. So we'll take a look at the restraint policy to make sure
Okay.
that's edited.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Alpert, yes?
Just one quick thing on discipline as well. I was doing some reading just today, actually, on this concept of restorative justice. There's a study from, it's actually a whole report from the state of Illinois on how to implement it. And there's some interesting stuff in there that hopefully that when you look at the policies that we talk about, there's elements of students being accountable to one another for the harm that they do, and that victims have a say, and they're empowered by taking part in the resolution. They're not just observing what's happening. And I think we already have peer mediation in the schools, and that can be maybe in certain cases expanded, and I think that's great. But I also just want to say that at the same time, if kids are harming each other, whether physically or mentally, that it's critical that the administration takes action. And sometimes, I think in certain cases, that's absolutely going to be a suspension. And I know sometimes that happens with kids that you would think would be young, and then you hear details and you say, oh, okay, that's regrettable. But you know, the bottom line is kids have to be safe. Our kids have to feel safe at school every day.
Okay. Just my comments are, now that the budget season is pretty much almost finished, not quite there just yet. The creation of the committees that we spoke to, that the board sent the letter out, we want the community and the students and the staff input. So now that the budget season is pretty much past us, we have a few minor things to work out. You're going to see those committees starting to form. You're going to see some policies among the board as far as directing some of those committees, and we're going to see the formation of some of those. And we're going to ask for the community, students, and staff to be part of that, because we all feel as a board that that information is very, very important. Okay, last thing on the agenda is the next board meeting. Going to be held on May the 7th at Liberty Middle School. That will be the presentation of the budget, final budget, among other things. Is that a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.